He survived the wilderness, but nothing prepared him for his lost love's return. The wind howled through the Colorado pines like a wounded beast, carrying the bite of snow and the threat of another storm rolling down from the high country. Silas Harper tugged his buffalo coat tighter around his shoulders and squinted into the swirl of flakes. Buck, his Mustang, picked his way down the frozen slope with care, each hoof cracking through a skin of ice. For 12 long years, these mountains had been the only place Silas called home. The jagged peaks rose around him like ancient judges, their crowns lost in cloud. At 32, he had lived more than a third of his life in wilderness, and the wilderness had shaped him. Civilization had once offered him tenderness, then heartbreak. He had traded it for the clean cruelty of survival. His hands were scarred from steel traps and winters, his beard thick, his eyes trained to scan every ridge for game or trouble. The saddlebags behind him bulged with pelts, beaver, wolf, fox, enough to buy salt, flour, powder, if the storm didn't bury the passes first. Pine Ridge came into view like a half-remembered dream, a scatter of rough buildings crouched against the wind. Smoke tore sideways from chimneys. Silas had not planned to stop here. His trading post lay a day's ride north, but Buck favored one leg, and the storm pressed close. He guided the Mustang down the main street. Windows glowed faint against the gray, snow piling high against doors. The saloon spilled a stripe of yellow into the street, yet for late afternoon, the town was quiet, too quiet. Then he heard it. Fiddle music carried clear through the storm, steady, insistent. He followed the sound to a small church at the end of the street, its windows blazing with lamplight. Horses and wagons lined outside, their owners gathered within, unconcerned by the weather. A wedding, he guessed. People here must be either deeply in love or in a great hurry to marry in weather like this. He left Buck at the livery. The freckled boy who took the reins stared at Silas's wolfskin cap, his rifle, the ferrule cast in his eyes. Mountain men were rare in these parts now, fading like old tracks. The boy rubbed his hands together. "Storm's a mean one, mister. Wedding at the church. Mr. Morrison's marrying a lady from back east. Pretty as a picture, they say." Silas grunted, uninterested. He wanted only a hot meal, a roof, and a bed until the storm broke. At the inn across from the church, he paid for a room and turned to climb the stairs. That was when the church doors burst open. Music and laughter spilled into the street, lanterns swinging against the dark. The wedding party poured out, voices bright, their joy sharp against the storm. Silas paused at the window. The groom came first, a heavy man in his 40s, face flushed, eyes small and watchful. Jonas Morrison. Silas knew the name, whispered on trails. A man who owned freight lines and mines, a man who always got what he wanted. His thick hand gripped the bride's arm like property. Then she appeared. She stepped into the storm in a plain white dress, the fabric clinging, snow dusting her veil. She lifted her face to the falling flakes, and Silas's heart slammed hard against his ribs. Even through dusk, even through the veil, he knew that face, the curve of her jaw, the tilt of her head when something caught her eye. He had not seen her in 20 years, but he knew her as surely as he knew the shape of these mountains. She turned. Her eyes found him through the window. She froze. Her lips parted, and with a suddenness that stole the breath from him, she pulled free of her husband's grip and walked straight across the snowy street. Her dress dragged through drifts, her eyes locked to his. Silas moved too, as if drawn. He pushed open the door just as she reached it. Up close, she was more beautiful than memory had any right to be. No longer the laughing child, but a woman grown, her green eyes flecked with gold, her presence, at once fragile and unyielding. He smelled lavender through the sharp winter air. They stared at each other, breath steaming, time collapsing. Her voice came soft, but sure. "Do you recognize me, Mountain Man? I was your childhood neighbor." The words struck him like a blow. He knew her. Clara Turner. Libby. The girl who had run with him through Missouri fields, who had caught fireflies in jars, who had sworn they would be friends forever. The girl who vanished the night her family's barn burned, never to be seen again. "Libby," Silas whispered. She smiled, sad and trembling. "No one has called me that in years. It's Elizabeth now. Elizabeth Morrison." Behind her, the groom's voice bellowed. Jonas Morrison shoved through the crowd, his face dark with anger. Clara flinched but did not turn. She touched Silas's hand, her fingers ice cold. "I'm glad I got to see you again," she whispered. "Glad to know you're alive." Then Morrison was upon them, pulling her back with a possessive grip. His words were smooth, but steel edged them. "You'll excuse my wife. She's overtired from the celebration." Instinct screamed at Silas to act, to tear her away. But the law of town and marriage stood like chains. Clara let Morrison lead her, but her eyes clung to Silas's until the storm swallowed her. Silas stood in the doorway, long after the party had gone. Snow stinging his face, his mind racing. Upstairs in his narrow room, he sat on the bed, memories flooding like a river too strong to dam. The girl who had scraped her knee, falling from an apple tree. The girl who once told him she would marry someone brave like him. Now she belonged to Morrison. The storm battered the shutters, but Silas heard only her voice through the years. "Do you recognize me, Mountain Man?" He did, and the recognition hurt more than any wound the wilderness had given him. The storm struck Pine Ridge with full fury that night, hammering the wooden buildings, shrieking through the narrow streets like a predator, hunting for cracks to slip its claws into. Silas Harper lay awake in his rented room, the lamp sputtering on the nightstand, shadows moving with the wind. Sleep would not come. Not after seeing her, Clara Turner, alive, changed, bound to Jonas Morrison. He pressed his scarred hands over his face. He had faced avalanches, grizzlies, the hollow silence of endless winters. Yet nothing had shaken him like the look in her eyes outside that church. Memory clawed its way back through the years, sharp as broken glass. Missouri summers that seemed eternal. Running barefoot through waist-high grass, the hot smell of hay in barns where they built forts. The hush of twilight when they lay side by side, counting stars they swore were meant for them alone. She had been the heart of his childhood, until fire took her father. And by dawn, the Turners were gone, their house ash and silence. He had searched, riding through towns with questions that met only shrugs. For years he wondered if she'd lived at all. And now she had returned, married to a man whose name stank of greed and cruelty. A knock startled him. He opened the door to find the freckled stable boy, snow on his shoulders, cheeks raw from cold. "Your horse'll be fine, mister. Stone in the shoe, just like you thought. Be ready by morning." Silas gave him a coin, but something held the boy at the threshold. "You were at the wedding," Silas said, more statement than question. The boy nodded, eyes bright with gossip. "Whole town was, 'cept those who had to work. Mr. Morrison's a big man, owns freight lines, mines, brings in food all the way from Denver. Bride ain't local. Came from Philadelphia with her ma just 2 months ago. Pretty thing. Folks say she's refined." He hesitated, then leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Her ma died last week. Lung fever. That's why it was all rushed. Morrison offered to take care of her. Folks say it's kindness, My ma says it's a shame. Silas's eyes narrowed. Why a shame? The boy shifted, boots squeaking on the floorboards. Morrison's got a temper when he drinks. Worse. Ma does laundry for him. Says his first wife didn't last long. Fell down the stairs, broke her neck. Least that's the story. But Ma swears the bruises told different. The boy's words chilled Silas more than the storm. He dismissed him with thanks and closed the door, jaw clenched, heart thudding with quiet rage. Elizabeth, Clara, had walked into a cage. By next evening the storm eased, but unease had only thickened in Silas's chest. He crossed the snow-choked street into the saloon, hoping whiskey might steady his mind. Warmth, smoke, laughter pressed around him. The wedding had spilled into a town-wide revel. Morrison's men raised their glasses, loud and crude. To the new bride, may she give him strong sons, and may she survive the trying. Laughter roared, raw and ugly. Silas's hand tightened on his glass. He drank, forcing himself to stillness. At the next table, two men leaned close, their talk sharp as knives. She's different, this one. Refined. That's what Morrison wanted. Class. He's aiming high, the other said. Talk as he wants to run for governor when statehood comes. A fancy wife helps a man like that. Funny, though, his first wife, Margaret, still whispers about bruises that didn't match no fall. But Morrison had alibis, and money smooths everything. Silas drained his whiskey and left, before his temper betrayed him. Outside, the wind cut his face raw. He stared at the Morrison house, lamps glowing warm behind heavy curtains. Somewhere inside, Clara sat with a man who might have killed before, and might kill again. That night, unable to rest, Silas roamed the streets. The storm had passed, leaving the town muffled in white silence. He drifted near the church. Through frosted glass, he saw a flicker of lamplight. Then the side door opened. Clara slipped inside, shawl wrapped tight, her face pale in the moonlight. Silas waited, heart hammering. Then followed. The church was still, candles burning low on the altar. She knelt in the front pew, shoulders shaking. At the sound of his boots, she turned quickly, eyes wide. Then she relaxed, whispering, "Silas?" He came closer, cautious, as though she might dissolve back into memory. In the dim glow, he saw the red mark on her wrist, the shape of a man's hand. "Are you hurt?" "Not badly. Not yet." A bitter laugh broke from her lips. "He's drinking with his men. I said I felt faint. Came here for quiet." Her eyes shone with a grief that seemed too large for her frame. "Oh, Silas, what have I done?" He sat beside her, voice low. "The boy told me about your mother. I'm sorry. She was all I had. When she died, I had nothing. No family, no money. Morrison seemed kind. He paid for the funeral, spoke of partnership, of safety. I thought it would be bearable." Her hand trembled as it brushed the bruise on her wrist. "But I see now what I've traded. Kindness for chains." Silas's chest ached. "If you need help." "No." She shook her head fiercely, tears spilling. "You always wanted to rescue things, Silas Harper. Wounded birds, stray dogs. But this isn't a sparrow. This is my life now." His words came quieter still. "Did you choose it, Clara? Or did circumstance choose for you?" She could not answer. Her hand sought his, clinging as if memory itself might hold her together. "How long will you stay in Pine Ridge?" "As long as needed," he said. Steady as iron. Her grip lingered, then slipped away. She stood, her shawl falling back into place. I should go before he notices. At the door she turned, and for a heartbeat Silas saw the girl he had known, strong, stubborn, alive with fire. Then she vanished into the night. He remained long after, staring at the altar, whispering a prayer he was not sure heaven would hear. Dawn came sharp and cold, painting the mountains gold, but Pine Ridge carried tension thicker than the frost on its eaves. Silas stood at the window of his room, watching Morrison's grand house at the edge of town. He knew now he would not leave, not while Clara remained caged in those walls. At breakfast, the innkeeper leaned close, voice lowered. Trouble at Morrison's last night. Mrs. Dobbs, the cleaning woman, says the new bride locked herself in her room. Morrison pounded the door, shouting fit to raise the dead. Whole house heard it. Not a good start for a marriage. Silas's hand tightened on his coffee cup until it nearly cracked. His instincts, honed sharp by years of wilderness, screamed the truth. Clara was in danger. By lantern light, Silas Harper met with Tom Brennan, a wiry ex-cavalry scout whose eyes carried the weight of long roads and darker deeds. They stood behind the livery, the smell of hay and horses mingling with cold air. "Morrison's shipment?" Silas asked, voice low. "The one robbed at Devil's Canyon. What do you know?" Brennan spat tobacco into the snow. "Inside job. Had to be. They knew too much. Wouldn't surprise me if Morrison staged it himself. Insured that cargo for twice its worth." Silas studied the man, his jaw tightening. He'd burn his own wagons for coin? Brennan's laugh was sharp and bitter. Morrison'd sell his soul twice if the price was right. You want proof? Talk to Clarence Headley, bookkeeper. Small as a rabbit and twice as nervous. But he knows where the bones are buried. The lead weighed on Silas like a stone. He thanked Brennan and slipped into the night, his mind grinding toward grim purpose. Clarence Headley lived in a narrow house, reeking of ink and loneliness. His hands shook when he opened the door, eyes darting behind Silas as though expecting ghosts. "I can't," he whispered, before Silas had even spoken. Silas stepped inside, his shadow looming across ledgers piled high. "You can. Morrison staged that robbery. I need the truth written in your books. Clara's life may hang on it." At her name, Headley froze. Something broke inside him, and he fetched 2 heavy ledgers from behind a false panel in the wall. "2 sets," he muttered. "The ones he shows, and the ones that show everything. Fraud, bribes, debts. If he finds I gave you these—" "He won't," Silas said. "You take the late stage to Denver. Tonight." The man pressed the ledgers into Silas's hands, as if they burned him. "God help us," he whispered. Silas left with his burden, hope flickering like a fragile flame. But fate has a taste for cruelty. Before dawn, the night sky blazed orange. Shouts rose, bells clanged. Silas sprinted through the snow toward Morrison's estate. The carriage house was a furnace, horses screaming inside, townsfolk forming a frantic bucket line. Jonas Morrison stood in the yard, nightshirt whipping in the wind, barking orders with a voice thick from whiskey. Then Silas saw her. Clara, framed in an upstairs window, fists pounding the glass, firelight flickering against her pale face. The door to her room had been barred from the outside. Silas didn't think. He grabbed an axe, stormed through choking smoke, and splintered the wood. She collapsed into his arms, coughing, eyes wild with terror. "He locked me in," she gasped. "I know." He carried her down, lungs searing, and laid her into the arms of waiting women. The crowd swelled around them, whispering, eyes shifting toward Morrison. Silas's voice carried sharp above the chaos. The door was barred from the outside. I saw it. A murmur rippled like wind across grass. Morrison blustered, face purple with rage. But Dr. Whitman shouldered through, his spectacles fogging in the heat. He examined Clara by lantern light, his hands gentle but grim. Bruises, fresh and dark, patterned her arms and ribs. His voice was cold as stone. This woman has been beaten, repeatedly. The murmurs grew into outrage. Respectable masks cracked. Women clutched children closer. Men spat into the snow. Morrison's power trembled. Silas knew the town had been waiting for something, anything, to break the spell of wealth and fear. This was it. By morning, Judge Carlton reviewed Headley's ledgers, the real ones, his lips thin with disgust. Fraud, theft, bribes laid bare. Warrants were drawn. Morrison's empire, built on lies, began to collapse like rotten timber. His own men drifted away, whispering betrayal. Still, Morrison walked free on bail, rage in his eyes, like a fire no storm could quench. Then came the note, nailed to Dr. Whitman's door, the words carved into rough wood, noon, Main Street. Come alone or she dies anyway. Morrison. Silas read it in silence, his jaw locked. This ended today. Pine Ridge emptied as the sun climbed. Doors barred, windows shuttered, but eyes peeked from cracks. Silas Harper and Jonas Morrison stood in the street, 20 paces apart, the snow bright as bone beneath their boots. Morrison's voice carried venom. You ruined me. Business, wife, everything. I'll see you dead. Silas's reply was quiet, steady. You ruined yourself. Time slowed. Morrison's hand twitched toward his holster. Both men drew. 2 shots cracked like thunder. Morrison staggered, shoulder torn. Silas dropped to one knee, blood seeping from his side. Morrison snarled, dragging a derringer from his boot. Before he could fire, the sheriff's rifle barked. The gun spun from Morrison's hand. He collapsed, screaming curses into the snow. The sheriff stood grim, voice iron. It's over. Morrison'll hang for fraud if not for murder. Clara ran to Silas, kneeling in the snow, her tears cutting bright tracks on her face. Don't leave me. Not again. He forced a breath, lips curling in a faint smile. I'm still here. Looks like we both survived. Silas Harper woke to the bitter tang of medicine and smoke. The light in the room was soft, filtered through lace curtains that belonged more to gentler times than to Pine Ridge. He lay in Dr. Whitman's spare bed, bandages tight around his ribs, each breath like fire. The ceiling beams above him blurred, then steadied. A chair creaked. Clara sat beside him, her face pale but unbowed, her green eyes fixed on his with a steadiness that pierced deeper than words. For weeks, she remained there, tending him with quiet devotion. She read to him in low tones when pain kept him from sleep, or simply held his hand when silence was all he could manage. Bruises faded from her arms, though Silas caught the shadow of them still, a ghost of what she had endured. Morrison rotted in his cell, his empire ashes. Whispers said the gallows awaited him. Others claimed he'd never live long enough to see trial. His enemies too many, his debts too wide. Silas didn't care. The storm that mattered most had passed. One evening, snow fell outside in gentle drifts, and Clara set aside the book she had been pretending to read. Her hand slipped into his, soft but firm. Philadelphia was my mother's dream, she said. Not mine. I have no ties there now. My choice is here, with you. If you'll have me. Silas's throat tightened. His scarred hands trembled as he turned hers over. It won't be easy, he said hoarsely. The mountains are harsh. They take more than they give. Her eyes glimmered with fire. I'd rather face storms with you than comfort with anyone else. Silence stretched, long and full. Then he nodded, unable to stop the rough smile breaking through. Then it settled. Spring came slow but sure. The passes began to thaw, rivers loosening their grip on ice. When the day came to leave, the town gathered in quiet knots. Some wept openly. Some stood with arms crossed, pride hidden behind stern expressions. Pine Ridge had seen Morrison's power crumble, had witnessed Clara's courage, and now they watched the two of them set out, as if the mountains themselves had summoned them. Clara rode a sturdy bay mare, wrapped in a plain wool cloak. Silas rode Buck, slower now but still sure-footed, with a pack mule trailing their supplies. The sheriff tipped his hat. The innkeeper pressed a loaf into Clara's hands. The stable boy grinned through tears he tried to hide. They said little, for words failed in moments such as these. At the edge of the wilderness, Silas reined in, the peaks rising before them like ancient sentinels. He turned to her. No regrets? Clara met his gaze, her breath misting in the crisp air. None. I choose this. I choose you. They rode into the high country, the trail vanishing beneath new snow, the sky vast and blue above them. The land swallowed sound until only the creak of saddles and the breath of horses remained. Silas glanced at her, the memory of childhood fireflies flickering at the edge of his mind. Her eyes met his, and she smiled with a tenderness that cut through the cold. Do you recognize me, mountain man? I was your childhood neighbor. His hand found hers, rough palm against delicate fingers. I recognize you, Libby. You're my home. The wilderness closed around them, not emptiness, but promise. Pines leaned in like witnesses. Rivers whispered beneath ice. The mountains stretched eternal. Together, they rode forward, scarred yet unbroken. Two souls carried into a beginning as old as the land and as new as love found again.
Silas and Clara rode into the wilderness together. Two hearts that survived the storm to find love again. Subscribe to Western Stories and Tales for more frontier adventures where courage meets destiny. Until next time, ride safe.